Hi, my name is Sarah Jerem and you're watching Artistic Digs. This series shines a spotlight on musical contemporaries who inspire me to talk with them and learn more about their creative space. Welcome to Artistic Digs. I'm very excited to introduce my special guest for today, Michael Herring. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yay! So I'm just going to do a little introduction just to introduce you. Michael Herring is a Juno-nominated double bassist and composer based in Toronto who writes, performs, and records across genre lines. Equally comfortable in jazz as in folk, world, and pop rock settings. Michael Herring is a major contributor of original music to a number of groups that he leads and co-leads. Michael Herring Quartet, Way North, Peripheral Vision, Michael Herring's Vertigo, the Uplifters, and Harrington, as well as the Bird Brains.
The Bird Brains, a new one that hasn't made it on the bio. It's so new.
Exactly. Yay. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. But yeah, this is so awesome. I'm so excited to talk to you about all the exciting things that you've been doing over the past little while. But I've also been in this sort of Michael Herring rabbit hole for the past few days, and it's just been amazing to see how much music you have created so far in your career.
Thanks.
So yeah, super inspiring.
I feel like that the feeling of not creating, like, you know, that feeling where you like are like, oh, I can never write another song again, or I like. It always is there, and then somehow it like seems to cause more music to keep coming. So
yeah,
my wife Rebecca Hennessy, the trumpet player, who is going to be on one of these episodes, right?
Yes.
She always has to remind me, like all those things you did, like, 'cause I always forget, like that how much has been going on, and I feel pretty lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. That's so nice to have a partner who inspires you like that and
Yes,
supports you.
I assume you have that as well, and
Yes.
it's nice to be in a musical house. I think at one point in my life, I imagined like I had a breakup with a musician ex, and I was like, it's better to not date a musician again or something, like, because nice to have some diversity in your life, but maybe I don't know. But as fate would have it, I ended up marrying a trumpet player and a singer, and it's great to make music together. Like, some people also are like, oh, you never want to make music with your partner or whatever. I said whatever a lot, but you know, or whatever. And I love making music with Rebecca, and for us it came kind of organically that we started playing together. I think the opposite of you guys, we started playing together after we'd been together for a while, whereas maybe you guys started making music together and then ended up as a couple, I think.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's cool. That's so cool. I didn't know that actually. So, when did you start playing with Rebecca? Like what
A
around?
lot of it happened in that time when we were in New York, when we saw you down there. We both had grants right after we got married in 2013 to spend a bunch of time down there, and that's how Way North came to get formed. We were down there hanging out, and then just wanting to play with people, and Peter I knew a little bit, and Richie was a friend of friends, and we just ended up jamming, and then all of a sudden we were like, oh, this is really fun, and it became a band that we've been at ever since, and so just sort of organically we started playing sessions with people because we were down there together, and we kind of ended up doing things together, and it was really fun, and certainly Way North had a lot to do with that because we were both writing for the same band, and you know, the band started to record and tour, and then we just did more and more together.
Wow, that's so cool. How long you were in New York for quite a while, right?
About
Like
6 months.
yeah. And Rebecca was there for the
She was there
same.
the whole time. Yeah,
Okay.
that time. Yeah, I've done a few different, you know, whatever, medium-sized grant trips to New York, and that was the longest one, and we did that one together, and it was really nice. It was really magical, kind of New York honeymoon in a way, because we sort of took this 6 months off after getting married, and
Wow.
it kickstarted a lot of music for both of us.
Wow. Wow, that is so cool. I didn't know that. So, wow, you guys have really since then come out with so many projects together, including Way North. Do you want to talk about any of those projects here?
Yeah, I mean, it's I was just sort of thinking about the last year of music, you know, and we're lucky to have a studio in our home, and because of that, we've been doing a lot of stuff. You know, I mean, Rebecca, I didn't have anything to do with it, but Rebecca finished her All the Little Things You Do album here, and then we recorded together the beginnings of another record that we did right before we had Nancy, our baby, and then Friendly Rich, who's a really fun musician who a lot of us, I know him, I don't know why I said us, but a lot of people in the jazz world might not know him, but he's kind of, I don't know how to describe him. He's kind of Tom Waitsy, but that doesn't quite sum it up. He's a little bit performance artist, and he's a little bit kind of Tom Waitsy in his music, and
Yeah.
he's just an amazing musician. I love his music, and I love the opportunity to play with him. And him and Dave started a song together called "Wipe It," and it was about wipe the slate clean. And it was kind of, I think it's got like this sort of, both of them have some bit of germaphobe, and I think there was a little bit of like undercurrent of like literally keeping things clean in the song. And they sent it to me first, I think, to put some bass on, and then because of that, it was like, oh, maybe we could add Rebecca, and it turned out to be this really fun track. And then Rich and I have a long-running, what's a joke? An inside thing where we send each other pictures of herons. And Rich has this funny language. He has his own names for everything, and he calls them harns. So we send each other harns. And I was in New Zealand, and I sent him a picture of a bunch of white harns that were actually egrets. And I got in trouble. And so Rich and I wrote this song called No Egrets together that started, my first time, I don't know if you've done this successfully, but I had a dream of Rich singing "Everything's Still Different Till the End" in exactly his voice, like that. And I woke up and I sang it in my phone.
Yeah.
And I sent it to him. And that's why we, you know, sort of between the egrets photo and that, we wrote this song. It's really fun. I really like it. And Rich took it in like a crazy wild direction, and it was a really fun co-writing experience. But I don't know, have you ever pulled that one off where you dreamt music and got it out?
Yeah, not as I'd say as clearly as yours was. It was like very audible, like you could hear exactly who was performing it and everything. That's so cool. But yeah.
I had to like actually check. I was like, this isn't one of your songs, is it? Like it was one of those things where it's like, because it so clearly was him that it was like, it seemed like it might just be, you know, you think you'd dreamt a new song, but you really just dreamt that song off his record.
Right? Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. So like what are your like how does the collaboration the songwriting collaboration work like when you're doing
A bunch of different ways, I guess. That one, we started that one really a long time ago, I feel like maybe September 2019.
Mhm.
And both of us were busy, and I was dragging my feet, and Rich is really good about keeping the like kind of heat on, getting things done really nicely. He never says like, hey, he just sort of says, hey, what about that thing? Maybe we could. And so Rich came over, and I had that like line, and I thought we were going to start pretty much from scratch, but Rich had all of this music. Like he'd written this crazy 7/4 kind of calypso rhythm on guitar, and he had this whole other, almost seemed like a separate song. Like I was like, how are these going to go together? And
Wow.
yeah, and we just worked on it together, and thank goodness we wrote a bunch of stuff down and we recorded it. Never believe you'll remember anything. I think that's like songwriting tip number one. You will not remember that thing, that best line you thought of, that little melody you thought of. You will not remember it. Never,
Yeah.
never don't record it or
Yeah.
write it down. And I sort of went through the archives like 6 months later in the pandemic, and was like, Rich was like, hey, let's get this done now. We have time, obviously. And so I was able to piece all the bits together, thank goodness. And then he had most of the words he'd written, and I wrote another verse for it after, because we were like, oh, we need more. And so it was kind of mixture of the like write together and having brought some stuff together, and then we wrote together, and then we worked apart, and then we kind of assembled it. And it was actually the first time I've done this, and I've started doing this more with that band, and I think it's mostly that band. A little bit, I've done some recording with this, well, we put out an album with this band called the Bonafide Scoundrels, that's Kevin Breit's band. And thank goodness we did it, because it was January 2020 that we recorded it. You know, like it was, and Michael, the accordion player, lives in New Orleans, and for the four of us to be together, it's like, who knows when it can happen next, you know? And So thank goodness we did that. But then when March hit, Kevin was like, we should all record. We all have studios, let's record. And it was really cool because I never get to make that much music with Michael because he's in New Orleans, and it was really nice. And we recorded 25 or 30 songs over the past year, basically. And then it was kind of, they're sitting there. I don't know if they're ever going to see the light of day. I really hope they do. And it's kind of stalled in some way in this sort of creative world that we have created. But with those tunes, and also with No Regrets, I had this idea of sort of making a demo in Pro Tools, which has not been my normal way to write. Like I usually think, because of being a jazz composer first, and I'm more likely to like put it in Finale or put it on paper, and it's like a score. But I put it into Pro Tools, and I made this weird, like I guess it's part of having some time in the pandemic too, but I made like a weird drum machine kind of MIDI beat for it. So it had this like weird, because it was in 7/8, it was very hard to like really know how it went. And so I was like, I couldn't really practice it, or I couldn't get it out and know if we had it done. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to sort of put the parts down and then send it to Rich to see if he likes it. So I needed something more than just a metronome, I felt like. So I made this weird like MIDI drums, and then I kind of was having fun. So I put like MIDI Latin percussion. Nice. And then, so it just made this like kind of fun world to write to. And then that ended up actually being the bed track for the song.
Wow.
And then I played electric bass on it, and Rich played guitars and started like singing. And then we sent it to Dave Clark to play the drums, and then we pulled out the MIDI drum, like, so kind of it built up. And then Rebecca played on it, and then we put a whole bunch of samples of birds singing in the middle. And so it was this weird, like kind of production-y kind of way to make music that was really fun. So that's been a cool part of the pandemic, is not being able to be together has taught me a lot about recording and making music that way.
Yeah, and different mediums, different creative mediums. Yeah, that is so cool.
Brings out maybe a different part of your voice to use it.
Absolutely. Wow. So interesting. So the Bird Brains has, I think, 3 singles, is that correct?
Yeah, we have 3 songs out. There's that Wipe It one, and there's No Regrets, and then there's a song called Ponte Corvo, which I think is the village where Friendly Rich is in Italy, where Friendly Rich's family is from. And I don't know, like I was sort of asking him what the song was about, because it's in Italian, and Rich likes to push boundaries. So I was like, I don't really want to put something out there, but I don't know what it means if I have to stand behind this. Because I've been part of things with Rich where people have been like, that might be offside, Rich. And then he's like, oh yeah, I'll change it. Like he's willing to put his foot over the line, which I love about him. But also it means one would be advised to see what we're talking about here. But it also, he talks about the sign of the end of the world. I think it's the end of life. The end of, it was like words I sort of understood from music. It was like del segno, which we know is the where you go back to in music, and then del segno de la something de la vida is the like line in it. And so I really liked it. It's like quite moving, and we made that one, and I really like it. And Rich has been getting videos made for all of them too, which is really cool. That he's really good at making things happen. It's inspiring to me to make more of that happen. And then we've got 2 more on their way. There's one called Animal Farm that Rich wrote. It's got like a kind of Tom Waitsy, like kind of broken lope to it. And then I wrote a tune called I'm Not Walking Away, which was originally called I'm Down in the Bird Blind, but Rich thought that too many birds in the name of the band and the song was too much. So it's called I'm Not Walking Away. And I like it better, actually, when I think about the message of it. I think he was right. And I just made a music video for that, kind of inspired by Rich. And then Dave had this idea of staring into the camera when I'm singing, and then having my eyes closed when I'm not singing. And so we went down to High Park, and we took all this footage with lakes and birds and did it in time lapse. So it's like super fast sky. So I'm really, really excited to share that. And hopefully around the time this comes out, maybe that will be our fresh single, and the listeners can get to hear it.
I hope so too.
I'm really excited to share that song. And well, actually, we talked about me making a special version of it for this, so I'm going to.
Yes, please. Yay.
And then we'll do that. It's a song about getting ready to have a baby, and about birds, and it has the word harn in it, which I've now explained is a heron. So there's a couple inside jokes in it, as well as Dave has a song from his band, the Woodshed Orchestra, that Rebecca and I both play in, called "Show Me a Sign," and the song says "Show me a sign, baby," and so I put "Show me a sign, baby" in the song.
Nice.
And that's when, I don't know about you, but for me in songwriting, I love to talk to other songs. Like I like the idea of I would say I'm not creative. Like I like to make a collage. Like I just sort of, if you can steal enough things and smush them together, then no one will know.
I think it's like creating like a canon too, or like an Easter egg sort of trail.
Oh, nice. Where you're like, dun, dun, like that kind of Easter egg where there's, or do you mean like Easter eggs, like secrets from
Like,
the,
yeah.
like the thing that you'd get in the video game that's like that little thing that you had to find.
Or the other one too. What's that one called?
The nesting ones,
yeah.
I forget what they're called.
Russian doll, right? Isn't
Yeah,
it?
but
Like
there's there's a word for them.
Yeah. Yes, I know.
But
That's so cool. Like, okay, so when have you always written songs and like you do a lot of singing?
yeah, I think I always wanted to, and sort of like there's always been sort of a folder of stuff that's been kind of private, and I mean, a lot of it has to do with Dave Clark. I should never minimize how much he has had to do with the trajectory of my musical career. Like we met in about 2006 and through his group, the Woodchoppers Association, which is a crazy collective improv band, which basically just everyone he meets, he invites to it to come play, and anyone can come play. And the cool thing about Dave is he exists in both the improv world and the rock world, like the art rock world, with both, you know, he played on all of Gord Downie's solo records, or not all of now, but at the time he played on the first bunch of Gord Downie solo records, and he was in that band, the Real Statics, and he was in these sort of like fairly famous Canadian rock things, but also, you know, the Dinner Is Ruined, much more experimental rock, and then the whole improv world too. So he brought together a lot of different people like me that were coming out of a nerdy jazz background, and people who were coming out of that full-on like rock thing, and it was really interesting groups of people to improvise with, and then I did a couple of these, and I always tell people this story as like young musicians to remind them to always take every musical situation seriously, because I don't know how you feel, but often I think like in a certain kind of like impromptu improvising thing, it's just kind of like a throwaway. Like you've got together, you've done some improvising, it's fun. I don't know. That's where my head was at then.
Yep.
Which is 15 years ago now that I think about it. And but I obviously had a good attitude, because a couple of days later, Lou Melville, the guitar player in that world, called me and asked me to do these tours with those guys, with Jah Youssouf, who's a musician from Mali, from West Africa. And so sort of from this improvising world, I got sort of drawn into this world with Jah from Mali, and also with playing with Dave and his Woodshed Orchestra. He always has these two wood bands that confuses everyone, but the Woodchoppers is the improv band, and the Woodshed Orchestra is the kind of crazy dance party, New Orleans-y, funky band. And in that band, the very first night I went, I thought I was going to do the Woodchoppers, basically. I don't think I really understood what I'd been hired to do. And I got there, and I don't remember how many tunes there were in the band at that point. That was 2006 or 7. But now there's like 230 songs in the folder there's like Bon Kyrie, like this is, and they're numbered like a dance band. Like we're going to play, you know, 158, and they're all Dave songs. And Dave gave me a microphone, and I was like, I don't sing. And he was like, and then every song he'd go like this to me, like, you're singing backups. It's not like, it wasn't optional. And it was more like a pop show than a jazz or improv show, you know, and it really kind of nudged me in that direction. And then me and Dave and Jason Kenemy and Lewis were the rhythm section for this first tour with Jah Youssouf from Mali. Dave and Lewis and a few of their friends had gone to Mali and made music and hung out with all these musicians in Mali few years before I knew them. I'm really sad not to have known them and gotten to go, because Mali is such a sad story right now, where it went from being one of the most stable and kind of functioning West African nations to just a total disaster. And it's sad, and I don't know, I don't imagine myself in my lifetime getting to go. It's that bad in my mind, and at the time it felt like I would be going. Anyway, it was some of the most, it's kind of a sidebar, but it was some very meaningful music in my life that we got to make. But also me, Dave, and Jason, who are the Uplifters now, would hang out because you're going on tour, you're sitting around, you're waiting backstage, and the three of us started playing music, the three of us, in this sort of casual songwritery sort of way, like making songs up, just kind of on the spot. And they're both kind of amazingly creative people, and I sort of felt dragged along. And then we started getting together once a week and bringing in songs, and I just sort of felt this, like, I was encouraged and driven to keep up, and so I started bringing songs in, and that band has 75 original songs or something, mostly by me and Jay, but all three of us, like, brought in by me and Jay, and then we all sort of co-write them. And we made a whole first record in 2013, I think, that didn't really get heard much. All of us were a little sad that we didn't push it hard enough, like it just sort of, when it came out and what was going on with everyone's lives, it didn't come out very well. Like, the business side of music and the creative side of music are sometimes not friends. And so during the pandemic, we kind of accidentally, I feel like, then all this pandemic music for me has been kind of like, oh, we should do a thing. Like, hey, like, we were just sort of talking with Jason. I was telling him about some of the recording we were doing with Kevin, and he was like, oh, that sounds really fun. I was like, well, we should record that tune of yours, Draw a Line, because it's like one of our favorite songs to do live, but we never recorded it. And then we just did it, and then they were like, that's fun, let's do another one. And then, so we did 4 songs, and we had this other one, You're a Rock, one that just came out as a single yesterday, I don't even know when, or soon. And it was sitting around mixed and not mastered, just sort of, I don't remember why. Jay got it finished for some project and never went anywhere, and so we just like stuck it on. So we have this 5-song album that we're going to put out, and it really feels nice. And the songs that I sing on it are some of my most personal, and I've learned so much singing during the pandemic. Like, I've done so much more lead singing and singing into a microphone, and it's hard. Singing is very hard. I have so much respect for you guys that have done it for your whole career, and it's so vulnerable, and it's a hard instrument to control, and it's it's a lot, and it's been cool learning to, like, kind of, I feel like I kind of went from bass player who sings to, like, wanting to be a singer, and it now is like, I feel like I need a voice lesson now. Like, I need some like, I need to learn some things. Like, now that I've learned some things, and so now it made me realize how much more there is to learn.
Yeah, it's lifelong learn.
Of course, every practice.
Yeah. That's so exciting. And I love that, because I'm like a firm believer in, like, anybody can sing, but not everybody who wants to sing does.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful to see that.
It's one of the things from Dave too, that he really encourages everyone to have a voice, like, both to sing, but, like, not like literally use their singing voice, but to have their creative voice, and I think coming out of jazz school, there's a certain musical elitism that's there, and I really felt it, and I participated in it. Like, we're part of this thing, and we're making this sophisticated music, and like, my early attitude, like, with some of those first modern jazz records I made was basically like, sounds so unflattering about myself to say it, but, like, you'd be lucky to hear this, or if you get it, great. If you don't get it, then it's on you, or some kind of like, like, I'm making this thing, and it's art for art's sake, and whoever hears it, I don't really care. Like,
right.
And over the past few years, I've really thought more and more about wanting people to hear it, and wanting, like, in some ways, I think it's actually very emotionally guarded position. Like, you're like, oh, my music's so sophisticated, and if you don't get it, whatever, like, I'm over here, don't look at my heart, kind of. Like, and then when you, like, if you really want to share it with someone and want them to feel something, then you open yourself up to them not feeling it or not liking it, and you're suddenly very, very vulnerable. And I listened to an amazing podcast that Kevin told me to listen to, Kevin Breit, of it's the Broken Record podcast, which is Malcolm Gladwell's music podcast, and it's Flea, the bass player from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who I knew nothing about other than that he was the bass player from the Red Hot Chili Peppers and acted in The Big Lebowski. And he is so emotionally vulnerable in this interview, and he basically cries, like, because their first guitar player died of an overdose, and he's just talking about this whole crazy world as like kind of young punks they were in, like this kind of crazy world, and also just about making music for people. Mm-hmm. And he says, I always wish I could do it literally, but he says basically that it's the musician's job to emotionally connect with the musicians they're making the music with, and connect that to the audience. Yeah. And that's your job. And he said he'd come up in a jazzy world where things were sophisticated, and more sophisticated was better. And then he played with punk musicians, and he was like, oh, wait, like there's this raw, just thing. And that is like making all these people move. And from him, I kind of took, you could have both, you can make complicated music, but also try to make that reach people.
Wow. Yeah, it's actually, if you can get the chops going in the institutionalized music world, and then bring what you're talking about into music and make that your voice for, like, that's life. That's like
that. I mean, that to me is exactly the dream. I don't think not practicing or not learning that's not like this sort of what's the word for it? Like this sort of like the uncarved block from Taoism or something, where you're just this like unaffected thing, just emoting this perfect untouched music. Or maybe it'd be like what are they called? The Shags, those like the girls that their dad kept them away from music, and they, My Pal Foot. Do you know My Pal Foot?
No.
There's this, I hope, what are they called? The Shags? We're gonna have to fact check this, but They definitely had a song called Foot about their cat. And anyway, supposedly their dad kept these girls from hearing any pop music or any music, and so they would like invent music themselves, and they made this super kind of outsider art music because they're inventing music themselves, or I don't know. I hope I'm not selling it wrong. I haven't thought about it in years, but I really think that learning about music is good. Like, I think you need to, like, if your ear is really good, then you need to learn to read music, and you need to learn about theory. And if your theory is really good, you need to work on ear training, and you need to like practice technique. And I studied a lot with the bass player Mark Helias in New York, and he would say, like, you're basically learning so that you can play the thing you hear.
Exactly.
Like, so you're trying to find the things you can't do, so that if you heard that thing, you could do it. Yeah. Like,
wow. Yes, exactly. And your earlier stuff, like I was listening to Vertigo. You have 2 Vertigo albums. I think I was listening to the 2009 one.
Okay.
Dark Materials.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so amazing. It's so beautiful. And
thank you.
And very moving. And I have so many questions. But
okay. I really like to hear that, because that album, I have a lot of insecurities about it. So it's cool. It's cool to hear that it feels good to listen to now, because I felt like we were learning how to play with Dave Binney in the studio on that one, because 2 nights before we were in the middle of a tour, and what have we done? We did like half a tour, came back to Toronto, recorded, and then went back out and did a couple more dates. And 2 nights before, Nick said to Dave, like, when you give me that look, what do you mean? And Dave was like, well, it means I really want you to like give her and like just let it out of the box, and like let's just like let it all go. And a lot of that music is hard, or in weird meters and stuff, and we sort of couldn't. I felt like I said to Dave, like, if we let it go, we're gonna, like, the 11's gonna break apart, or we don't, at the time, didn't have the skill to just let the 11 be crazy and keep the 11 working, or whatever the thing was. And Dave was like, let's screw it, just let it go, like, let's just, it was basically like, really let it all. It's one of the magical things with him. I think he really puts a lot of emotion out of his saxophone. Like, that's what drew me to his music and made me ask him to play with us. Like, it's very, it can be quite sophisticated modern jazz, but also on a certain level, it can actually sound quite simple. Like, some of those songs, they sound like, oh, it sounds like poppy jazz or something, and you listen to it, you're like, oh my god, like all this crazy rhythmic stuff or harmony stuff is going on, but it really feels maybe like a pop song sometimes.
Yeah.
And then we went in this, we had this like after gig conversation, and we were all kind of like, okay. And then we played this next gig and we just were like, you know, and that's fine live where it's like the mistakes just fall behind you and you carry on and you have this like great feeling maybe, you know, like, and we were just like, yeah. And then we got in the studio and I was like, holy shit, like, how do we have both of these things now? We're in the studio, it needs to like be a record of what happened. Like we need to make it happen, but we also are trying to like let it out of the box all at once. So it was a really, it was a very learning couple days in Canterbury. And yeah, anyway, thank you for listening to it. I'm glad you liked it because I haven't gone back to that one in a while, and it, yeah, I'm curious. Maybe I'll put on a song later and see what I think.
Yeah, no, it's so, well, that's so interesting to hear that backstory, because it sounded to me like you guys were giving it. So
great,
yeah,
perfect.
to me. But there is that, of course, that element of studio recording, like itis. And I definitely, I have way less studio experience than you. And so, yeah, just being able to let go when you're doing
Yeah, and knowing how
for
much
real.
too, like I think that's a skill that
Yeah.
that that I look up to. People that I look up to seem to know that, like how much to just give her and how much to like hold the thing together. And I don't know, I mean that's one of the things I just think about as a musician in general, like how, like, who's giving her and who's holding it together. Like it's,
Yeah.
you gotta need both to some extent all the time. And
Mm.
it's interesting. I mean, recording Rebecca's All the Little Things You Do album with Kevin, right, live off the floor, like like the newer one, he added all his parts later because it was pandemic, you know, and we just record our parts and send it to him. So it didn't affect me. Like my bass playing doesn't change no matter what he plays, and that's the setting. But it was really interesting because he has done so much different kinds of playing. You know, it's a thing I admire about his career, that like he's done the sort of crazy improv-y stuff and his sort of like I don't know what you call the sisters. I think he'd get mad if I called it fusion. I don't really think it sounds like fusion, but what's the word for it?
It's,
Instrumental rock, like
yeah,
that.
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And then, you know, like playing with Nora Jones and stuff, which much more like kind of Americana. Genre words in music are so hard, you know, like,
Yeah.
and in the studio he really gives her every time, like, and like improvise new intros or endings, and like, and he just like, okay, the song's starting, and he just starts it, and you're like, oh, this is a whole new intro, like, and he's just like more ideas all the time, and it's really quite magical. And I think when you know, he's always looking for that spot, like, is he gonna like sit in it and let Tanya Gill shine, the piano player, or is he gonna like just make something new or push the song past where everyone was done, but he's still going, you know, like, and it's gonna push it to some whole new. If you listen to the end of Keep the Light Bright on Rebecca's album, that whole jam section, which Alex and Claire sang those beautiful "You gotta keep it bright" over, Kevin just kept going. That wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't ever part of the plan, you know. And it's one of the most magical parts of that song. Like, and I think there's a certain spontaneity, like, to having the whole band pulled past what they were expecting. And
Creating moments.
yeah, and that's a hard skill to decide. Like if I try to create this moment, like, am I going to ruin this take? Or if I try to create this moment, am I going to make this take, you know? And that's, you almost can't think that, but some part of your brain has to, like, or it's like, it's almost the telepathy part of music, you know, where it's like, if I keep going, are they with me? And that's actually, when you sent me those questions for what I might think about why I would like to make music, that's what I love to make music for. That thing, the telepathy that could happen, like, that you can make anything happen together, like, and whether that means playing the simplest right down the middle what you were expecting together, and it just feels so good because you're doing it so together, or it's like this crazy about face or turn. That's, to me, that's my favorite part of making music.
Yeah. Wow, that is so heavy. Um, wow. My mind is kind of whew.
I don't even know how we got here.
Oh, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question. Just this is like a random one about going back to Vertigo.
Uh-huh.
Bearings on Care Paravel. So
Yes.
is that Joanna Newsom?
Yeah, nice one. Nice
Yay! Cool.
one. Wow. Yes. Well, you know how I said I like to talk to other songs, and sometimes that's just a title, you know? Like, Dark Materials used to be called His Dark Materials, and I felt like it was too much. Like, you know, I'm not going to write a song called, like, the title of the thing, so I dropped the His to make it a little more... but I definitely wrote that music after reading those books, and Bearings on Caravel has some kind of resonance with that. I don't know exactly what, but has some resonance with that Joanna Newsom album and that
Yeah.
song.
Yeah, I love that tune. Actually, I did like an arrangement of that one.
Nice. Is that Clam Cockle something Cowrie? Wait.
Oh,
With a beautiful, it's got something beetle shell with its bearings on Caravel.
Bridges and Balloons.
Ridges and Balloons. Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
I have to go
Yeah.
back to the album. I haven't listened to that album in ages.
Oh,
I was obsessed with it, and I saw her play right after that at the. Were you there at the Mod Club?
no, no, I
Oh,
never have seen her play live,
okay,
but I
yeah,
was also obsessed with that album.
yeah. I went and saw her at the Mod Club soon after that. Maybe when that next one, Wise or Ease, whatever it's called, came up.
Yeah, I'm not sure how
There was.
to
I
say
remember being told how you're supposed to say it, and I've now forgotten. But and then I
it.
kind of lost track of her. I listened to those first few albums, and then I, for no good reason, just didn't keep up with it. But
Funny enough, we've been on a Portlandia binge, and she was in an episode of Portlandia.
oh wow, cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Playing?
as a harpist, yes.
Perfect.
It's actually a
Perfect.
hilarious, of course, hilarious
Yes.
little episode, but yeah. Yes, Joanna Newsom is so amazing, and I love her voice. And she's had to change, I think, a lot of her sound over the years.
Right.
Just
There was this thing like there's a rawness to that record, like,
yeah,
and there's sort of an EP that came up before that I heard, or maybe I had like an illegal download of it or something, like of the earlier thing, and then when that one came out, it just sort of, it seemed like such a perfect moment. I mean, it's not fair to put someone in like a box when they're in their, I don't know, she probably was in her early 20s, like, and it's like that was it, and then is it all downhill from here, like, but there was something very magical about that record for me, or maybe it's just for me too. It was like at a time and place for both, for that music and where I was at. And
I think I heard it in Banff for the first time.
okay,
You
cool,
know, and
that'd be
then
great.
that,
Yeah,
of course, that association was like, okay, you know, part of that creative,
yeah,
yeah, just starting to write, and yeah, yeah, it's beautiful music though.
yeah.
Um, and I want to go back a little bit to talk about your experience playing with Jah. What's
Youssouf,
sorry? Can you say that again?
Youssouf,
Jah
Youssouf. It's,
Youssouf.
yeah, it's basically Joseph, I think, in
Youssouf. Okay.
another language.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean that. It was really crazy. Like, he comes from abject poverty, and the way they told it to me was kind of the guy that you heard in taxis. That taxis would have like a homemade cassette of his music. Like, he wasn't. Well, in Mali, you can be born a cast musician at griot, and like a lot of those musicians the kora players that we would know, like Tiamani and Diabetes, people like that, they're born cast musicians, and they have that responsibility as griots because they're also the like storyteller, like, you know, so it's about passing on the oral history of your culture through the music.
So born into a role of a storyteller, is that?
Yeah, storyteller musician, yes.
Wow.
So you'll see like a lot of the famous Mali musicians, you know, will have the same last names, like Sissoko or Tiabeti, and it's because they are born into this role, I guess. Like it is a cast thing, and you're born into this position. But I think Ali Farka Touré is not, and he's also from a different, you know, more northern desert culture, I think. And Jah was not born into it, and so he played an instrument called a camelingoni, which is kind of like a pentatonic kora. It has like less strings and less notes, and I think it's part of it is kind of like a people's instrument opposed to the like kind of cast instrument. And because of all of that, I think he had a kind of scrappy, like go get it kind of attitude about himself, and he also had like the warmest heart of gold, and he there was so much culture and language barrier making music with him. Like he only spoke French and a Malian language that he spoke, and so we interacted in French, and our French was all mediocre, and we kind of developed a working French, like to understand each other. And he also speaks with a heavily, he spoke French with, he's since died, but he spoke French with a heavily Malian accent. So he was like, there's a bunch of things I sort of came to understand the way he said them, but it took a while. And we learned the music in the studio from him. Like it was just like, and trying to find, like Dave and I couldn't find beat-1, and we couldn't figure out what to do, and he was like trying to like dance the songs to us and like sing the songs to us, and he was just like, he was so frustrated. Like he was just like, come on, you idiots, like how you can't do this, and why have I come all the way to Canada? And then we're like, it's amateur hour. It all, that's, he never said anything. He was super kind, but it really felt that way. Or maybe I was just beating myself up, but it was really hard, and we spent a lot of time together, the group of us, the 5 of us, like Dave and Jason and Lewis and me and Jah, and we did a bunch of touring, like not far. I don't even know if I left Ontario. They did a couple of shows out with a couple of us subbed out of a couple of spots of it. They might have gone to like Quebec without me, but we didn't travel far that time. And we made a record, and then we went over to the Island studio, the gas station on the Toronto Island, and Dave had the whole Woodchoppers, like all the crazy improvisers together, and basically made these crazy recordings of just like kind of improv, and Jah sort of, I don't know if he was improvising or playing his songs. I guess he's sort of playing his songs, but they're kind of open. And we made this record called the Woodchoppers and Jah Youssouf. And Lewis is kind of a mad scientist engineer, and he cut this crazy thing into a record and kind of, you know, like it's just like all this playing, and he kind of made it into songs, or found the songs in all of like the 2 days of recording or whatever it was. And I was only there for one of the 2 days for some reason, I think too. So it's like all these different people in and out, and all like, and so he kind of made this, I don't know what you'd call it, world improv Malian album. And then 2 years later, we toured it, and Jah came back, and also a musician that played a different kind of ngoni named Abdoulaye Kone, who's a young guy that they had also met when they were there. And we toured like a bunch of the big folk festivals. Like we traveled far and wide with those guys, and it was intense, like culturally intense and musically intense. And we were a large group. Like maybe we were 7 or 8. I don't know if we were 7 or 8 counting those guys. We had like 3 horns, and me and Dave and Lou and Jason, and wow. It was quite the undertaking. And like we went to Winnipeg Folk Festival in Calgary, and we did a bunch of gigs in between, and Hillside, and I don't remember what else, a bunch. And then they were here, you know, and like they kind of needed to be put up or entertained, and so hung out a lot outside of playing too. And like there's a kora player that they knew from Mali named Mansa Sissoko that they'd done a bunch of playing with. I got to do a little bit of playing with. He lives in Quebec City. And I was backstage with Mansa and Abdoulaye, and I was talking to Mansa about this DI box he had, and I was like, oh, that's cool, like how much that cost? And he was like, oh, $250. And I was like, oh, that's a lot of money. And Abdoulaye was like, no, it's not for you. And I was like, it is. And he was like, no, like basically I've seen how you live, like you have like at the time I lived on my own in a small apartment, and I had a car, and you know, like I seemed immeasurably rich, you know. Mm-hmm. And compared to them, I'm sure I am, you know. And it's very hard to bridge some of those gaps. And actually my quartet album is called A Very Large Gap because of that exact thing, that it just it was crazy. And I'm just laughing. after. It was right after, it was quite a while after, I guess. It was after New York. Through some border stuff, we came back from New York earlier than we'd planned, and we'd sublet our house. And so we actually lived at a cottage near Combermere, Ontario, and wrote and practiced for, I think, about 5 weeks that winter. Spring, winter, like it went from the well was frozen to you could swim at the very end. It was a pretty magical time. And while I was there, so that was in the spring of 14, I heard that Jah's wife died, and she died of typhoid fever, I think, or typhus. I mix them up. But she died of something that was entirely treatable. And it just was, they didn't have money. And I just was left with this I still feel it, like it's just this horrible failure that we can't, I can't fix all the poverty in Africa. Like I know that, but it seems so like abstract. Or you could give some money to Doctors Without Borders, or what, you could, or the Red Cross. You could try to, like, from your comfortable Toronto life, you could try to help the world, with in a certain kind of way. But these were like my friends, and we played all this music, and it was really devastating. And after that, I sort of ended up being the point person of the group of us who was talked to Jah on the phone, and we were trying to send him. Lewis had been trying to send him money the whole time, and money, and it's complicated. It always was complicated. And once I sort of became the one of us that was doing it, it became became apparent how crazy complicated it was. And it was and then he died. How long ago has it been? I remember a couple of years ago anyway, he died. He'd had a stroke right before our second tour, and he showed up and his face was kind of asymmetrical and he didn't look that great. And he just bounced back. Dave thinks it's music reprogrammed his brain. Like Dave feels like he just came and he just started playing, and then he lit up and he was all of a sudden going. And then we never really figured out what happened, but I'm suspicious he had another stroke and then was unwell and died. And we just couldn't support him, and I don't know, you asked me about that music, and it ended up a very long story, but it really shaped me a lot, like thinking about how and why we make music, and can you make music to help people, and when people ask questions about cultural appropriation and what does that all mean, and I don't have any clear answers to any of these things I'm saying, other than I was in the middle of it, and I didn't feel like I appropriated music from Jah. He was teaching me the music, and we were traveling together, and he was getting paid, and I think it's mutually beneficial, but you're always in a unbalanced situation. Like whenever what you gave him, and you could say, oh, we sent him home with like more money than he could possibly make in a year in Mali, or whatever the thing would be, it doesn't fix any of these inequities, and that's hard. And I was left with the hope that you could make music and you could make change, and even have jazz and make change. I mean, on the newest Peripheral Vision record, there's a song I wrote about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada, and I don't know, I don't know if you've done this where you write a grant and then you get it and you go, oh no, now I have to follow through. Like I've had a bunch of things I've done that were large in my life, that I had this idea and I wrote a grant, and then the grant forced me to, the very first Dave Binney tour was like that, where I wrote this grant, I was like, ha, and then if I don't get it, I don't have to do it. And then I got it and I was like, oh no, now I have to do all this hard work. And
yes.
And when I got that writing grant, I was like, oh no, I said I'd do this. I have to now put my money, they put the money, I've had to put my music where my mouth is. And I'm lucky enough to have a friend who worked on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a high school friend, and then he was the director of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation in Winnipeg for a while after that. And I just called him up and it was like I've said I'll do this thing, how do I do this appropriately, And Rai told me, make sure you write in your own voice. Like he was always a huge advocate that reconciliation has to come from non-Indigenous Canada. I would think it's important, I should say it right now, that I'm not Indigenous. Like it's important to be clear who you are and why and what you're writing about. But it's been interesting, I wrote that music and some of it, it's very out and intense. Like it's like whatever 15 plus minutes on the CD, and there's some pretty like intense free jazzy, like distorted guitars and crazy drums, all that stuff, and people have responded really well to it, like in a way to like have a kind of programmatic thing to say like this is what this music's about, and then they hear the music and they feel that thing, and to me that's pretty magical. And so for me that's part of what I kind of hope you could convey, you know, both instrumentally or, you know, with words you maybe have a little bit more of a chance to say it literally, but I don't know, trying to make a difference with music is it's what I'd like to do. You know, it's so hard to know what you've done, but
Well, we'll never know.
yeah, true.
Right?
Yeah, you just have to put it out there and hope that that flea thing, that you've made an emotional connection like to the music and to your friends that you're making the music with, and then you really hope that that thing goes out and people are somehow moved by it.
Absolutely. Wow, that's so yeah. I have been thinking a lot about recently just about privilege and the arts and accessibility to programs, and how, I mean, okay, so long story short, our car got broken into in St. Catharines a couple of weeks ago. Someone smashed the window and we didn't have anything of value in the car. And so it was all for nothing. They rifled through
Hmm.
our glove box and nothing was there.
Yeah,
And then
and
we
it's an
were on
annoying $200 window and horrible cleanup job.
500.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it got me thinking, you know, at first I was like, oh, you know, this is so, but we had $500 to be able to replace our car window, and the
Hmm.
desperation of that, what people are going through right now in the pandemic. There's a lot of poverty in St. Catharines, and we live in not like the highest income neighborhood, but we don't live in like the lowest income neighborhood either.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I've just been kind of thinking about like the importance of arts programming and
Hmm.
accessibility, and where there might be gaps in our
Yeah.
in our community that like that could change this. I mean, it's not going to change overnight, but you know, if you plant
Hmm.
enough seeds, like you can,
Yeah,
and music changes things. Like you can communicate a feeling, like with
absolutely.
instrumental music as well as vocal music.
Hmm.
So yeah. Anyway, that's just
Yeah, no, I mean that's the trying to make them get your music out there and heard, and who can hear it and all that. I think it is important.
yeah.
I was part of a series like playing in Barber Hall Park on Church Street, like beside the big community center there, and I think they're called 519, the
Oh
community
yeah.
center, and
Nice.
um,
Yes.
they like the audience that would come out. A lot of them were people, you know, experiencing homelessness or people who seemed sort of down and out, for lack of a better term for it, and they would sit there and like maybe they were drinking and you know whatever. Like it didn't seem like a ideal outdoor situation, but they loved the music and they would comment and they'd be like cheering, and you know like you're taking your music to I've definitely felt like I was on their turf opposed to they were on mine. You know, like they didn't pay to come into some place and see me where I'm comfortable. Like I was outside under a tent where they're comfortable, you know, and
Yeah.
it's cool. I mean, I just did the gig because it was a gig. Like didn't have any kind of altruism getting into it, but it was really cool to realize that that's what a gig was.
Yeah. Wow. Important. Yeah, that's really, really important. And I think it like, you know, we were kind of talking about a little bit just about like the elitism of institutionalized music and people's music,
Hmm.
and I really think like it's just about bringing music and high level music. Uh, If we have that within us, if that's like what we want to do, then like
Hmm.
make
Well,
it
and having
accessible.
music in the public school
Yeah.
system, properly funded music education there, where people have access to it regardless of their, you know, socioeconomic background. Like if your school, no matter what it was, no matter where it was, had that, then you wouldn't decide what you did based on what you could afford to do. And if we got to a world where there was either free or heavily subsidized post-secondary education, then you also wouldn't have to be making those, like people are making these decisions based on economic reasons opposed to any kind of talent reason, you know? And so
Yeah.
it's definitely an inequity in our society, and it doesn't feel like we're heading in the right direction right now. So I hope it slowly turns around. But
Me too. I know. But you like all the music that I've seen come from you always has so much social justice woven into its tapestry. You know, it's really it inspires me, and yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. So
It's funny as you say it. Like I never like thought it's never been kind of an explicit
no, you're not
thing,
like
but
trying to
but
be
also
like
like my
social
heroes in
justice.
high school were like Charles Mingus and Charlie Hayden, and you know, like I've loved that side of jazz since I was really young. So it's always been kind of poking at me, you know, like
Yeah,
and that side of pop music too. So
absolutely. Who were your early influences? Because you just mentioned a few, and
those
also,
guys,
yeah,
those
and
guys for sure, and Scott LaFaro a lot. I love that like Bill Evans trio with Scott LaFaro, and yeah, I mean, I was sometimes I regret on a sort of nerdy level of not like doing enough like meat and potatoes like 50s 40s kind of homework early, because I was definitely into a bit more of the like free jazz world and all that from a young age. But that's I was excited. I mean, my parents had this Smithsonian collection of classic jazz on cassettes, which is just like some like compilation, you know, of like whatever it was, 6 or 8 cassettes in this like box. Music is so it's funny that like the kind of like visceral is not the right word for it, but the like physical side of music has changed so much, you know, that it's all on the cloud now. But like that you'd have this like big cardboard box that had like a spot for all these different cassettes and a big booklet and all that stuff is. But I feel like I was one of the few people that liked the last 3 tracks. You know, it's like let's get ahead to the like Ornette Coleman things and the like Charles Mingus thing, and
yeah.
it just kind of captured me young, and then it
How
sort of been
old?
there for a long time.
How old were you when you were listening?
I don't know, 15 or 16 maybe. Like
Yeah.
I was really lucky. Like I got into playing double bass through the ukulele curriculum that was happening in schools in Victoria a lot. It came from this guy Chalmers Doan, who's from Halifax, but his sort of curriculum had sort of gone across Canada, and it was really big in Victoria where I grew up, and part of the thing was having a double bass and drums with all the ukuleles. And I think I got asked to play bass because I was tall, but that's sort of how I got asked. And then my parents were super supportive and got me lessons, and then the teachers were like, let's do jazz. You know, it's that thing that it's like now I do that. You know, it's like that thing where you're like, okay, we taught you the thing you want. Now how about you learn this? And I think I just must have liked it. And then somehow I ended up going to the summer jazz camp when I was like 13 or something. And that, you know, that just sort of started me down this path like very young. And,
Wow.
and here I am. I mean, I feel like it's like the sort of like, what are you going to do when you grow up question was never there, because I just sort of was doing this. I mean, I had other things I don't think I imagined myself as a jazz musician, but I also never imagined myself not as one. Like I just kind of was playing as what I wanted to do. And everyone always needs a bass player, so that's a lucky fluke that ended up playing with people a lot older than me and better than me the whole time. So
Wow. Yeah. Cool. And you moved to Toronto probably to go to U of T? Was that?
yeah, in '96, and
Okay.
I've been here ever since.
Wow. I think we were at U of T at the same time, not in the jazz program because I was in the classical program.
Okay.
Yeah, for a year in '99.
Yes, then yes. I graduated in 2000. So if you were there 99, 2000, yes.
Cool. Yeah, I would because classical was not my like cup of tea, as I discovered the hard way. But I
Yeah.
also got to see like this like little corner of the third floor of the Edward Johnson building, and everybody always looked like they were having a really good time there, and you were probably
Yeah.
one of them. And I was like, what are they learning?
Yeah. It did have a nice there's a nice clique, you know, because it was whatever. There was like 20 people in my year or whatever. You know, it was a tiny program, and so it had a real like cliquey vibe. Like I think for better for worse, like could be insular as well as special, or whatever the opposite of insular is. I don't know.
Yeah. But it looked like you guys were, or I shouldn't say, you folks were a lot happier than like the other 90% of the building, maybe.
Well, you did both, did you? Were you happier, or did you feel like you're? Well, I guess obviously, it's based on your career trajectory, you ended up in the jazz corner and stayed.
I did, yes. As much as it was, I don't regret that year of classical training because it really,
Yeah, sure.
it was a huge learning experience too. But I was under the false impression that if you could sing classical music, you could sing anything, which is such a terrible misconception and actually has
Right.
a lot of systemic issues behind it. So, anyway, but we're here now, so
Yeah, exactly.
we made
Well,
it.
it's one of those funny things, you're just it's one of those wherever you are, wherever you go, there you are kind of things, where you made the choices you made, and if you think like, oh, if only I didn't do that year of classical, or whatever the thing, that if only I, like, you did all those things we did, that's how we're here now. And it's I mean, I don't know. I feel lucky, and looking at your new record, I feel like you're lucky for having made such great music for this one. So I think I hope all those decisions were worth it for you too, because I mean, I don't know, not that one's record is the measure of a whole life, but somehow it's like a snapshot. In my mind, an album's kind of a snapshot of what's going on, and I hope it kind of is like, oh, here's this thing. Well, I feel like yours is a very personal album, actually, quite explicitly so, and it's cool to see, like, you're like, here it is, like, and to play piano and sing in the studio and all that. That's like I feel like the more, I'm about to say truth, and I don't know if I agree with myself, but I was gonna say, if the more vulnerable you are, then the more that thing is like a snapshot of where you're at then. And I'm not sure that the goal of music is to like bury your soul necessarily exactly. Like, I think you can be showing a side of yourself, or a character, or a public face, but there is something about showing this thing that's yours and important to you right now that really makes an album like, as we've talked about a bunch of old music of mine, it's funny to think that I'm now old enough that, like, that first Vertigo record's from 2005, like, that's getting to be a long time ago. And it's interesting to think about all the things that are on that album, and where I was at and what I was thinking about. And, like, certainly because they all have a personal, like, even just to say Bearings on Peripheral brings me back to what I was listening to and thinking about. And it's like, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I suppose you can make jazz, like, some people are like, oh, I don't care about the titles, and I don't like, it's just a thing. And I suppose you can make it music in a sort of detached sort of way too. So I don't know. Maybe it could be just as good.
Well, yeah, who knows? But I really like how you tackle things. Like, it seems like you have like a roadmap of your life. I was thinking just kind of last night about how courageous it is, actually, that you have created so much music over the pandemic, and you've written a lot of music specifically about the pandemic. Watching yours and Rebecca's live streams with Jazz in Toronto, and you're writing about that direct experience. I mean, like, I think maybe I've been writing, but not directly about it, and I think there's a little bit of maybe of avoidance of wanting to go there, because it is a really hard thing to be
No, well, there's no
processing.
there's no right answer to it, and no one's like no one's responsible to have their pandemic song, and no one's responsible to feel creative. Like, I've talked to so many friends who are like, oh, I don't feel creative, or I don't like, we can see smiling over my shoulder my double bass, but it's been fairly lonely this pandemic, because I haven't practiced that much, like, I haven't felt motivated to practice, because I want to play on gigs. Like, I want to, all that stuff I talked about earlier about wanting to, like, have the connection with people and play with people. And I've never been a practiceaholic. And so the lack of gigs kind of makes me go, oh, I could practice. And we also have a new baby. That's my other excuse. But
That's a pretty good one, actually.
But, I haven't been driven. And I think whatever it is that makes you want to do it. And I'm somewhat of an opportunist, as much as, like, I might sound like I have got a trajectory or a long-term goal. Like, the music I plan to write this year, like Way North was supposed to do a big tour this past March, and Peripheral Vision was supposed to have gone to Europe last spring, and all this stuff that didn't happen. But all of a sudden there was music happening, and I always think like musical opportunism is a good thing. Like if it's like there's something to do, I want to do it. Like if Friendly Rich writes and says, hey, like what if we did this thing? I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And so that's part of what's happened. And Rebecca was, it's true. I think Rebecca sort of wrote the more explicitly kind of pandemic-y songs, or at least started them, and we kind of co-wrote them. But the sort of like the Dandelions, Joy Will Find Us one and stuff like that, or With You in Isolation, like very much Rebecca started those kind of ideas. And for me, the more explicit ones I wrote were more about to have a baby. Like to me, those were the things that really like had me like the Down in the Bird Blind sign. I mean, I'm not walking away. It really was about like what's coming, like, and actually that song has the line in it, something's coming in it, which I sang exactly as if it was out of West Side Story, like, because that's my little inside joke in there too.
Cool.
But like it's like something's coming, like it's like like, and
yeah.
And I wrote another tune called Memo to My Daughter because I'm obsessed with Randy Newman's song Memo to My Son. So I knew I was having a daughter, so I kind of wrote a song, and I'm more positive than Randy Newman, I think, so it's a little less sardonic, but
yeah, it's beautiful.
Coming through the door, you're here to stay, the one that we adore. Yeah. You're coming to our house, playing on the floor. Can't wait to hold you, playing on the floor. You're coming to our house, empty out the drawer. Can't wait to hold you, playing on the floor. And you can feel all day long, play peekaboo all day long. You can wanna walk all day long. Don't listen when I talk all day long. And we'll always love you. I will always love you.
that's sort of where my creative head was, because it was just like there's a pandemic, but this thing is happening whether we want it. Like it's like this train has left the station, and pandemic or no, it's happening. So it was very much weighing on me, and so it came out in the creativity.
I'm sure that's like so much to be processing in 1 year, and yeah, it's amazing. And we've kind of like talked about how like the pandemic has created this new opportunity for family time for the three of you to.
Absolutely, it's in a way magical, and there's decisions we aren't having to make, which I'm glad for. And I've been doing a lot of playing on this website called Sync Space, and there's been actual gigs sort of happening simultaneously over the internet. And it started in Ottawa, so I've played these gigs with people in Ottawa, and I'm having gigs, which really feels really good. But also I literally have to book off like an hour and a half. Like I go upstairs, like I throw the Ethernet cable over the stairs and plug it in, and then I could play for an hour, and then I could be done. And I don't have to drive to St. Catharines and get home at 2 a.m, or like, and so there's some decisions that Rebecca and I aren't having to make. That is lucky. And so we are in this like online music world, which has its drawbacks, but also it's affording us time. So
Absolutely, yeah, and you're making the most of it. So, do you have any shows coming up online?
Well, Way North is going to do one on May the 21st. I hope that's right.
Oh, nice.
I should almost like pretend I'm not looking at my screen and just make sure I'm not lying about the day. Yes, it is on May the 21st.
Nice.
And we're doing that one. And Rebecca and I do a monthly gig on Facebook Live through Jazz in Toronto. The next one is tomorrow, so I'm sure this podcast will not be out, but it is on the fourth Saturday of every month. So those are coming up in
Okay.
May and June. So we'll do those. And yeah, doing a handful of those other sync space gigs too for different people. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's nice to feel like a bass player. And it actually is kind of making the bass call to me. So maybe we'll see. Maybe I'll be practicing again.
Yay. Yes, exactly. I operate sort of similar to you. Like if there's a gig, that's my like or a deadline of some kind. Like I'm very deadline motivated. So
yes, same.
Maybe. Yeah. So that's good. It's good to have these opportunities, and like it's so awesome that Jazz in Toronto has been doing this.
It's been such a service to the community. You know, like they've really created a home for a lot of people and kept things going. And yeah, I'm really grateful to them for the amount of music that they've made possible for me and Rebecca. And the very first one we did, I was super emotional. I was just like, oh my God, we have a gig. Like it just, I don't remember if it was like last May, maybe. Like it was like the pandemic was still relatively new, and it just felt like we hadn't played in months, and it was just like a thing to practice for and a thing to do. And
yeah,
it really is a really nice thing that those guys have done.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's like the nerves of doing I've only done one live stream performance so far with Jazz in Toronto, and it was only in March, but the nerves that came up with, doing this weird, you don't know how it's going to work, and is my internet going to be fine, and all that sort of stuff. But then you're just like, no, but now I'm playing a concert, and the gratitude of that kind of outweighs all the other things. Just
absolutely. And we're both lucky to be stuck at home in duos, which I think would be a lot harder to do when solo. Like there's a certain like weird energy drain down the camera where you're just sort of looking out there like, hi everyone, but you don't see them. You don't like the comments are nice, but the feedback isn't the same. So like having another person to kind of bounce off of is nice. Absolutely. But it feels relatively good. It does feel like performing. I like it.
And FYI, like the concerts that I've caught of you guys, like especially some of your like Memo to my daughter in particular, and some of the other ones, I'm like sitting there, just so you know, in the chat when I'm like, it's legitimate. It's very moving, and so that sort of dead air that you're feeling is not dead. It's
nice. Well, it's
supercharged.
Yeah, we've been lucky enough that people have been tuning in and commenting, and it feels it feels like making music for people, like, and if that's the goal, then it feels like goal is being achieved, even if it's not the like way that we imagine it happening.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so cool. And so thanks for doing those. And do you want to talk a little bit about your upcoming, so we've got the Uplifters, and we've got a few singles out already, two singles, right?
Yep. Yeah, okay. We're releasing the whole album, There's No Secret, May 21st.
Awesome.
And it's 5 songs. And, we've recorded it during the pandemic. I don't remember when we started, maybe starting last summer or something. And we did them a tune at a time. And that's exciting. Like, Draw a Line, the first one that came out, is like when we've played a ton, and it's so joyous and fun. And we got Rebecca to play solo on it. And so it really just kind of like pops out there, super fun. And then the next one, Jason's song "You're a Rock," is the one that is old. It's been recorded a few years ago, and then we put it on here. But it's a really beautiful ballad that he wrote, and we've played it a lot of times. And he sings it. I love Jason's voice. He sings it really beautifully, and it's I'm really into that one. And Paul Kalinske played a bit of guitar on it, which is really nice.
Oh, nice.
And then we did one of mine called "Song to Take Away Pain," and I wrote while Rebecca's mom was dying, and it was great to record that. It's a lot of feeling in that for me, and actually I sort of devised the arrangement for it from on our duo live streams. I sort of came up with this sort of solo bassy way to play it, and that sort of became the foundation of how we recorded it with the Uplifters. So that's really nice. And I wrote another song called "Hold Your Head in Your Hands" that I wrote after seeing David Byrne, who's one of my musical heroes. And that's some of my favorite singing I've done for a recording yet. That one, I'm really proud of it. And Don did some, like, Don Scott, guitar player who is in Peripheral Vision with me, for those of you who don't know the insider first names people, he put some like guitar loopy stuff on it that he's so good at. And we were like, we need some like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, Don, this is Don's thing. So we got him to do that. And we ended up with a bit of pandemic problem. I called it pandemic tuning because Jason's piano was a bit out of tune. And then it is a hard part of making music in the pandemic where everything layers. And so any problems start to spiral. Like I found that with like click things, or especially no click things, that if the time is a bit hairy, then as you pass it on 4 people down the line, it can get quite hairy. Like things can start, little problems can start getting bigger. And the tuning thing got a bit funny in the middle. And I'd played some background bowed parts that just really weren't sitting. And Dave was mixing it. And I called Dave. And I was like, Dave, it just doesn't feel right. And Dave pulled out the bows, and I think he pulled out the piano for a big chunk of it. And he just sort of made this crazy, like, he emphasized Don had made the part, but he really emphasized the crazy guitars. And then he played the little melody on a glockenspiel on top of it. And it's really beautiful. I'm really excited to share it.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it.
The end of May.
Yay.
So
On Bandcamp?
It will be, yeah. It's going to be on Bandcamp and all your streaming places. And yeah, I actually have to get organized with my Bandcamp, pre-release business and get it out there. So it's ready to get out there. And yeah, that's sort of the exciting one. And a couple Bird Brain ones are coming out. And
Yay.
Way North's we're trying to finish a record too that we recorded a year and a half ago. And it's just been sort of sitting there, and without the tour, there's sort of no motivation to get it done. So we're finally I think we're accepting now that we're not going to be on tour for a long time. So it's time to just get the record done and get it out there.
Yep.
So
I hear you.
It's nice. I mean, it's nice to keep creating. I don't remember if by the time we saw you in New York, if Rebecca had started her question, but there was a phase when we were down there in 2013 where I got really depressed about like, what's the point of all this? Like, what's the point of making music? And then Rebecca started asking all of our friends, what's the point of making music? And Nico Dan, great drummer, friend of ours, said, be prolific. That's the point of making music. So
wow.
It feels good. It feels good to still be prolific in these times for me. And, as I said at the beginning, I sometimes need to be reminded that I am, but it's nice. It's nice to keep making music.
Absolutely.
The point of making it is make more, I think. So.
And, time is short. It goes by quick.
Yeah.
So why worry? Just do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So easy to say those words, and then you're in the studio and you're like, eraser.
Yeah. Well, that's why there's so many self-help books, because they're easy to say, but it's hard to do.
Exactly. So you have a special performance that you're going to be presenting for this episode. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, this is a version of my song "I'm Not Walking Away," which is going to be coming out as a single with the Bird Brains soon, and it's a song I wrote, kind of taking our love of birds and the thought of a stork bringing a baby. So it's a song about it starts with "I'm down in the bird blind, I'm fine," and it's the idea of kind of waiting for a bird that might be bringing your baby. That's what the song's about.
I'm down in the bird blind. I'm fine, I'm not walking away from my scattered light that blew up on the floor. I'm down in the bird blind. I'm fine, I'm not walking away from anything anymore. I'm pointing my binoculars away from here, out past these slats, out beyond the horizon, looking for a long-legged bird with a prize in, looking for a horn with his legs a dangling, looking for a sign, baby, looking for a long-legged bird carrying my future in its mouth. I'm down in the bird blind. I'm fine, I'm not walking away from my scattered light that blew up on the floor. I'm down in the bird blind. I'm fine, I'm not walking away
Thank you so much for joining me today on Artistic Digs.
Thanks so
Yay!
much for having me. It's such a pleasure. It's so cool to talk about such a range of stuff. It's super fun.
Oh, it was great to chat with you. I'm like, now I just need to go out and start writing again. I feel like super, super inspired.
Thanks.
Yeah. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.